Here are the headlines for Tuesday, August 6, 2024. Chip wars will soon be data center wars as our next artificial intelligence trade develops. Author Chris Miller argues that data centers will be the key drivers of future technological advancements in the age of artificial intelligence, much like factories were during the Industrial Revolution. Many countries, including Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kazakhstan, and Malaysia, are investing heavily in artificial intelligence infrastructure, leading to a new form of competition dubbed cloud wars. American diplomats are also focusing on data centers as a way to counter Chinese technological influence, with concerns raised over partnerships between U.S. companies and Chinese firms like Huawei. Federal court orders California college to drop censorship policy. A federal judge ordered Clovis Community College in California not to enforce a poster policy that was used against 3 students whose anti-communist posters were taken down, citing violations of the First Amendment and 14th Amendment rights. The policy had forbidden displaying material deemed inappropriate or offensive, but the court found it too broad and vague, effectively giving administrators unlimited discretion to suppress speech they disapproved of. In a settlement, the college agreed to pay $250,000 in legal expenses and $20,000 each to the 3 students, as well as conduct annual First Amendment training sessions for all administrators going forward. After a perfect storm in the volatility market, Goldman Trader says we're about to enter the central bank response phase. The Bank of Japan's recent interest rate hike decision has been widely criticized, including by Goldman trader Paolo Schiavone, who echoed the sentiment that the move would lead to an unwind of approximately $20 trillion in carry trades. The market is following a predicted huge dead cat bounce, driven perhaps by Japan's Ministry of Finance selling some of its trillions in yen. The Bank of Japan has no choice but to reverse the carry trade as the Japanese government's balance sheet, which is valued at around 500% of the country's gross domestic product, or $20 trillion, is essentially one giant carry trade that cannot be sustained. Maduro arrests 2,000 Venezuelan protesters, vows maximum punishment. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is facing mounting pressure as post-election demonstrations continue, with at least 20 deaths reported in clashes between security forces and protesters. Maduro has announced the arrest of 2,000 civilians and vowed to punish those who contest his administration. Opposition leader Maria Corina Machado and presidential candidate Edmundo Gonzalez are among those calling for transparent election results, with Machado appearing before a crowd of supporters to encourage Venezuelans to fight for election integrity. The United States is among several countries pressuring Maduro to release voting details from the July 28th general election, with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken congratulating Gonzalez on receiving the most votes in the presidential election as documented by opposition efforts. Seattle considers catching and releasing from Des Moines facility after King County Jail runs out of space. The city of Seattle is considering a program that would pay for jail beds at the SCORE facility in Des Moines to alleviate overcrowding in King County Jail, which would cost between $1.5 million and $3 million annually. The proposal has received mixed reactions from residents near the SCORE facility, with some expressing concern about the potential release of offenders into their neighborhood. Under the plan, Seattle officers would escort offenders to the facility and court dates, but the process for handling releases is still being finalized. A similar program was attempted last year but ended due to cost and sustainability issues. What is the relationship between technology innovation and investor euphoria? The history of technological innovations is marked by periods of excessive speculation and investment, followed by collapse and financial losses. Examples include the railway bubble in the mid-19th century, where investors lost fortunes as overvalued shares plummeted, and numerous railway companies went bankrupt. The steamship sector, which saw a surge in investment but ultimately led to financial difficulties and company failures. The electric telegraph industry, where speculators drove up stock prices before Chemical Challenges, and Killistra readers drove up stock prices before Chen. In each of these cases, flawed thinking prevailed, highlighting the risks of overinvesting in emerging technologies without solid business fundamentals. These are the wealthiest suburbs in America. The wealthiest suburbs in the United States are primarily located in New York, California, and Texas, according to data compiled by Go Banking Grades. Scarsdale, New York, ranks as the wealthiest suburb with an average household income of $568,942 and typical home values exceeding $1,400,000. The top 10 wealthiest suburbs also include Rye, New York, West University Place, Texas, and Los Altos, California, all of which boast high average household incomes and home values. Bangladesh leader flees country in helicopter as protesters storm parliament. Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh's long-serving prime minister, resigned and fled the country after protesters defied a military curfew and stormed her official residence in Dhaka. The 76-year-old leader, who had been in power for 15 years, flew to India with her sister by helicopter, reportedly seeking safe shelter away from her home. Her resignation came a day after at least 95 people were killed and hundreds more wounded during a violent crackdown on protesters who opposed the reintroduction of a quota system in government jobs. The protests began nearly a month ago and had been met with violence for weeks, leaving over 200 people dead. Report finds Biden-Harris released 99 illegal aliens on Federal Bureau of Investigation terror watch list into American communities. A new report from the House Judiciary Committee reveals that the Biden administration's open border policies have led to the greatest illegal alien invasion in United States history, with over 5.4 million illegal aliens entering the country. The report also states that at least 1.9 million known gotaways have entered, bringing the total number of illegal entries to 7.3 million. Furthermore, the report reveals that at least 99 illegal aliens on the Federal Bureau of Investigation's terror watch list were released into the United States after being arrested by Border Patrol agents between fiscal years 2021 and 2023. Weird Democrats use 16-year-old photo of Kamala surrounded by Michelle signs to promote Democratic National Committee. The Democratic Party's official X account uploaded an old image of Kamala Harris from the 2008 Democratic National Convention to promote the upcoming event. The 16-year-old picture shows Harris watching Michelle Obama speak with signs that say Michelle in the background. The image is blurred and has a massive lens flare, raising questions about why it was used instead of more recent and clear photos of Kamala Harris. Some speculate that the use of this specific image may be hinting at the Obama's influence over the party, or even suggesting that Michelle Obama could replace Kamala Harris as a candidate. How Donald Trump can win or lose the election. Donald Trump should change his strategy in the 2024 presidential election by focusing less on criticizing Joe Biden's presidency as disastrous and instead highlighting Kamala Harris's role in those policies. By doing so, Trump can make Harris own the failures of the past 4 years, contrasting them with his own accomplishments during his term from 2017 to 2021. This approach would also help Trump avoid falling into the trap set by the left, which wants him to spend the next 3 months harping on Biden's dementia and Harris's record, allowing her to implement her hard left agenda if elected. Department of Justice should investigate China's United Front groups over violence in San Francisco. Report. The Human Rights First organization released a report detailing the Chinese Communist Party's acts of transnational repression against protesters in the United States during President Xi Jinping's visit to the country in November 2023. The report found that enforcement authorities exhibited a lack of awareness and were often unresponsive when alerted to attacks, which led some groups, such as Tibetan and Uyghur organizations, to cancel their protest plans due to safety concern. The report offered recommendations to various government agencies and Congress to address these acts of repression, including imposing targeted sanctions against foreign individuals involved in transnational repression and providing training for state and local law enforcement on this issue. Excessive internet use disrupts key parts of the teenager's brain. Teens are spending an average of 4.8 hours per day on social media platforms, with girls averaging 5.3 hours and boys averaging 4.4 hours, according to a 2023 Statista survey. Scientists have found that Excessive screen use is negatively affecting the mental well-being, social life, education, and work performance of teens, leading to addictive behaviors, reduced functional connectivity in brain regions used for active thinking, and changes in reward processing and impulsive behavior. A clinical psychologist recommends educating children about the dangers of unhealthy screen use as early as possible and treating teen internet addiction with a combination of family therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and parental support. Germany's electric vehicle sales sink 37% as subsidies end. The biggest European car market, Germany, saw electric vehicle sales plummet by 36.8% in July from the same month last year, as global electric vehicle sales continue to slow down. The drop was largely due to the German government ending subsidies for electric vehicles at the end of 2023. New car registrations for battery electric vehicles fell to 30,762 vehicles in July, while overall car market remained relatively flat with gasoline-powered passenger vehicles increasing by 0.1% and diesel car sales rising by 1.4%. These are the world's biggest submarine fleets. Russia leads the world in military submarines with 65 vessels, followed closely by the United States with 64 submarines and China with 61. Together, these three countries account for 40% of the global submarine fleet. However, when it comes to technology, the United States is ahead, with its latest Columbia-class nuclear submarine being considered one generation, or 10 to 20 years, ahead of counterparts like China. The American fleet also has advanced submarines like the Seawolf class, designed to address specific threats, and Russia's Sierra I class remains one of the most expensive and deep-diving submarines in the world. Why is the European Union upping the pressure on Meloni in Italy? Italy's energy crisis is bleak, with the country having spent over 100 billion euros trying to weather it. The European Union's austerity enforcement looms large, with Italy placed in the excessive deficit procedure for violating budget rules. Prime Minister Meloni must present a plan to Brussels and implement extreme austerity measures that could be worse than those during the 2011 to 2014 euro crisis. This economic implosion will likely end her time as Prime Minister due to lack of public support and control over financial institutions. The bigger story is that European Union countries are not in charge of their economies and foreign policies, with Brussels and Washington controlling them. From the NVIDIA chief executive officer to Warren Buffett, insider stock selling was an ominous warning ahead of market swoon. NVIDIA Core CEO Jensen Huang has been selling millions of shares of the company's stock, which should have served as a warning sign to investors that the artificial intelligence bubble was approaching a peak. Data shows that Huang's daily sale of 120,000 shares began on June 13th and continued into recent days, with most of it sold between $135 and $109 from June through July. Meanwhile, NVIDIA has informed Microsoft and other cloud providers that its most advanced artificial intelligence chip models face 3 months of delays due to a design flaw discovered unusually late in the production process. This news comes as billionaire investor Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway disposed of 90 million Bank of America shares in recent weeks, which was seen as a warning sign that Buffett saw trouble ahead. Bloomberg confirms engineering snags delay NVIDIA's next-generation artificial intelligence chip rollout. NVIDIA shares have been battered by a global sell-off, rising recession fears, and artificial intelligence bubble unwind after the company reported delays in its new artificial intelligence chip production. The Blackwell series of chips faced engineering snags that will delay their release by 3 months. NVIDIA had informed Microsoft and other cloud providers about the issue, which affects tens of billions of dollars worth of advanced artificial intelligence chips ordered by companies like Google, Meta, and Microsoft. The delays have sparked concerns among investors, with shares falling as much as 31% from their peak in mid-June. Focus on renewable energy spurs concerns over supply-demand equation. The United States government is investing significant funds in renewable energy programs, including $502 million for vehicle technologies, $318 million for solar, $280 million for bioenergy, $189 million for bioenergy, $199 million for wind, and $179 million for hydrogen. However, despite these efforts, the nation's demand for electricity is increasing rapidly, and there are concerns that renewable energy sources cannot keep pace, particularly if fossil fuel-powered plants are removed before being replaced. Utility and transmission system operators have expressed fears about a disconnect between projected demand and federal government power plant rules, which could lead to costly and time-consuming gaps in the grid. Armed migrant gangs stalk United Kingdom while government cracks down on native Brits. The United Kingdom government has been criticized for its handling of recent protests, with many Brits arguing that Prime Minister Keir Starmer's policies have emboldened violent migrant gangs to take to the streets and attack white people at random. The authorities have been accused of having a two-tier policing system, where migrants are given free rein while indigenous British protesters are treated as terrorists. Starmer has announced plans for a COVID-style lockdown to control British patriots, but many see this as an attempt to subjugate the population rather than address the underlying issues of mass immigration and rising crime. The situation has been described as a symptom of a larger problem, with some arguing that it may be time for Brits to accept that their current government is the source of their pain. The World Health Organization is no longer fit for purpose. The World Health Organization is pushing for a silent coup against the governments of the world through proposed changes to its international health regulations treaty. The amendments would expand the WHO's powers, allowing it to declare public health emergencies and assume control over sovereign states' responses to pandemics and other health crises. This move has been met with resistance from many countries, which are concerned about losing their independence in matters of national security and public health policy. Peripheral neuropathy, symptoms, causes, treatments, and natural approaches. To alleviate symptoms of peripheral neuropathy, natural approaches include regular aerobic exercise, such as walking or swimming, for at least 3 times a week to improve symptoms and potentially delay progression. A gluten-free diet can also be beneficial in reducing neuropathic symptoms and improving quality of life, particularly for those with gluten sensitivity. Additionally, omega-3 fatty acids found in fish oil supplements have anti-inflammatory properties that may help reduce pain. Certain vitamins and minerals, such as gamma-linolenic acid and alpha-lipoic acid, can also be beneficial in alleviating symptoms. Maintaining good metabolic, vascular, and nerve health through a healthy diet and lifestyle is crucial in preventing peripheral neuropathy. Kamala Harris reportedly taps Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as running mate. Vice President Kamala Harris has selected Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate for the presidential election cycle. The Harris-Walz team will face former President Donald Trump and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance in the upcoming election. Walz, 60 years old, was chosen over other high-profile contenders, such as Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro and Arizona Senator Mark Kelly. He has been a leading driver of Democrats' attacks on Trump and is known for his liberal views. However, Walz has also faced criticism for his handling of riots in Minneapolis following the murder of George Floyd, and for championing extreme policies such as trans surgery and abortion law. Everybody knows. The globalist elite is intentionally destroying the existing world order, manipulating people through social media, public education, and television to create an authoritarian dystopia. The author believes that this fourth turning will end in catastrophe, and innocent lives will be lost as a result of the war for the future of civilization. The enemies are identified as despicable humans who control governments, corporations, and media outlets. These individuals have families and addresses, making them vulnerable to fear and resistance from those willing to fight back. Reflections on the recent rout from artificial intelligence skepticism to buy the fucking dip, Goldman draws 7 conclusions. The Standard & Poor's 500 index has tumbled over 6% during the past 3 days, as investor concerns about the durability of United States economic growth have pervaded financial markets. Equity volatility, as measured by the VIX index, has spiked from 16 to 39 during the same period and now stands at the highest level since October 2020. BBC describes violent Birmingham riot as largely peaceful. A riot in Birmingham involving hundreds of Muslim men resulted in violent attacks on innocent people, harassment of news reporters, and destruction of property, including a pub that was besieged by the mob. The BBC downplayed the incident, describing it as largely peaceful, despite acknowledging that several vehicles and a pub were attacked by Muslim youths wearing masks and carrying weapons. Labour MP Jess Phillips condoned the actions of the mob, claiming they were only there to protect themselves from racists. Sky News reporters were confronted by masked thugs, one of whom made a gun trigger sign towards the camera. The incident has sparked concerns about two-tier policing and media bias in the United Kingdom. Lucid shares soar on new Saudi lifeline. Lucid Group, an electric car maker, has received $1.5 billion in funding from AR Third Investment Company, an affiliate of Saudi Arabia's public investment fund. This is the second such investment this year, following $1 billion in March. The new funds will be used to produce Lucid's first sport utility vehicle, the Gravity SUV, and build a factory in Saudi Arabia with an annual capacity of 150,000 vehicles. Despite production woes and workforce reductions, Lucid's shares soared as much as 16% on the news. Co-founder leaves for I rival Anthropic. John Schulman, co-founder of Open Artificial Intelligence, has left the startup he founded in 2015 for competitor Anthropic. Schulman's departure comes after nearly 9 years at Open Artificial Intelligence and follows that of product manager Peter Deng, who quietly left some time ago. President Greg Brockman is also taking an extended leave of absence. Only 3 original co-founders remain at the company, including Chief Executive Officer Sam Altman, President Greg Brockman, and language head Wojciech Zaremba. Schulman played a key role in creating Open Artificial Intelligence's chatbot Chat, GPT, and led the reinforcement training organization responsible for training generative artificial intelligence models. Global markets rebound after historic bloodbath. Japan soars. Markets have found some reprieve following yesterday's hefty selling led by a substantial rebound in Asian Pacific trade that saw the Nikkei 225 close with gains of over 10%. European bourses are now flat or lower after an initial strength waned without a fresh fundamental driver. The United States economic data slate includes June trade balance at 8:30, and no Federal Reserve speakers are scheduled. Oil is holding near a 7-month low as a halt in production at Libya's biggest field refocused attention on the Middle East, while gold has steadied after being pulled into Monday's global rout. The Trump-Harris 2024 presidential election matchup is now official. The presidential campaign between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is entering its final stages, with both candidates rallying voters in swing states and competing to raise funds. The Harris campaign has reported having $96 million on hand as of May 24th, while the Trump campaign had $128 million at that time. More recently, the Harris campaign said it raised $310 million in July compared to $137 million for the Trump campaign. Ultimately, the election may come down to which candidate can successfully mobilize their core supporters on Election Day, with Biden relying on younger voters and Trump focusing on rural men who often do not vote. Musk confirms Report X closing San Francisco office. Elon Musk cited high taxes and crime as reasons for shifting X's San Francisco office outside the metro area controlled by left-wing progressives. Musk stated that it is impossible to operate in San Francisco if processing payments, citing companies like Stripe and Block that had to move. An email from X's chief executive revealed plans to shift employees from the downtown office to existing offices in San Jose and open an engineering-focused office in Palo Alto. This decision follows a recent law signed by California Governor Gavin Newsom, which bars school districts from requiring staff to inform parents of their child's gender identification change, prompting Musk to label it as the final straw. Markets after the bloodbath. The Standard & Poor's 500 index is currently below the 100-day moving average, but above the 200-day moving average, indicating a potential bounce. Key levels to watch include 5,100 support and 5,400 resistance. The market is expected to experience a volatile consolidation phase as it sober up from recent fluctuations. Saudi Aramco sees oil demand rising by 1,600,000 BP in second half of 2024. Saudi Aramco's chief executive, Amin Nasser, expects global oil demand to rise by between 1.6 million and 2 million barrels per day in the second half of the year 2024. The total global oil demand is projected at 104.7 million barrels per day for the full year 2024, which is closer to OPEC's projections than the International Energy Agency's forecast. Some analysts expect global oil demand to rise to above 106 million barrels per day in the second half of the year. Despite a recent sell-off in oil prices, Nasser believes that the fundamentals do not support the drop in prices and the market is overreacting. Rumble joins X in massive lawsuit against advertising cartel. Social media platform X has filed a lawsuit against the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, GARM, and several of its members, including CVS Health, Mars, Orsted, and Unilever, alleging that they colluded to control online speech. The complaint claims that GARM's actions were part of a conspiracy to unfairly discriminate against X and prompt an ad boycott. The lawsuit centers around an initiative by the World Federation of Advertisers, WFA, to establish arbitrary standards for content on digital platforms where its members may want to advertise, with GARM using those standards to perpetrate an advertiser boycott against Rumble and other platforms. The WFA represents over 150 of the world's biggest brands and over 60 national advertiser associations, giving GARM significant market power and representing roughly 90% of global advertising spend, which amounts to nearly $1 trillion annually. International Boxing Association holds press conference to address Olympic gender issue. The International Boxing Association held a press conference where they confirmed that 2 fighters participating in Olympic women's boxing are biologically male due to failing previous gender chromosome tests. Lin Yuting of Taiwan and Amane Khalif of Algeria were previously disqualified from competing in the women's category by the association, but have been allowed to continue competing despite the result. The association cited independent laboratory test results that demonstrated the presence of XY chromosomes, which they consider a disqualifying factor for female competition. The narrative has flipped. Goldman macro trader ponders what comes next. Goldman Sachs macro trader Bobby Malavi mocked the market situation, stating nothing to see here. The Nikkei experienced its single biggest one-day fall since 1987 with a 12% sell-off on Monday. Japan saw its highest turnover day ever, with over 8 trillion yen in trades. This significant downturn is attributed to an overcrowded long position in Japan, particularly among domestic retail investors who are heavily leveraged. Despite this, Japanese companies have been beating earnings estimates, with 56% exceeding expectations so far this season and seeing positive revisions and record corporate buybacks and dividend. The GARM's race, the House moves forward with investigation of blacklisting company. The House Judiciary Committee is investigating companies that use the Global Alliance for Responsible Media (GARM) system, which has been criticized as a modern blacklisting tool targeting conservative or dissenting voices. GARM was created by the World Federation of Advertisers to control public discourse by cutting off revenue streams to certain websites. The organization's head, Rob Rakowitz, has denounced free speech and pushed for censorship, raising concerns about bias in the media rating systems. The investigation aims to expose the use of these blacklisting systems to curtail free speech and is considered a welcomed effort for anyone concerned about the erosion of this fundamental right. Japan rushed to calm markets, trigger buying spree with emergency central bank meeting. The Bank of Japan's recent decision to raise interest rates is seen as a catastrophic policy error that will likely lead to a market crash and significant losses in votes for the ruling party. The move is believed to have been influenced by political pressure, with two senior politicians weighing in on monetary policy ahead of the decision. Consumer spending data does not justify a rate increase, but politicians may be more concerned about the weak yen and its impact on their re-election chances. Market watchers predict that it's only a matter of time before the market calls the Bank of Japan's bluff and forces a reversal of the rate hike. Federal Air Marshal whistleblowers report Tulsi Gabbard actively under surveillance via Quiet Skies program. Federal Air Marshal whistleblowers have revealed that former United States Representative Tulsi Gabbard is enrolled in the Quiet Skies program, a Transportation Security Administration surveillance initiative with its own suspected terrorist watch list. The program uses teams of federal air marshals to track individuals without their knowledge or consent, often targeting conservatives and those who have spoken out against the government. Gabbard's enrollment likely followed her criticism of Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and the national security state in an interview on July 23rd. Hedge funds bought the Monday dip at the fastest pace since March. Institutions bought the dip at the fastest pace in 5 months, despite JPM's trading desk urging them not to buy into the decline. Global equities saw modest net buying driven by long buys outpacing short sales, with hedge funds leading the charge in the United States. The majority of sectors were net bought, including information technology and defensive such as healthcare, staples, and utilities. There's no bad weather, there's only bad clothing. Global markets have experienced significant losses in recent days, but calm appears to be returning as the Japanese Nikkei 225 index rose nearly 10% after better than expected economic data was released. The Sant 500 lost around 4.8% across 2 sessions, while the Euro Stoxx 600 declined by a cumulative 4.9%. Despite this, some experts are calling for emergency rate cuts, with several shops suggesting 50 basis point cuts from the Federal Reserve at its September and November meetings. However, Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee has stated that the central bank's job is not to react to 1 month of weaker labor data, and that the error margin around non-farm payrolls estimates is as high as 100,000 jobs. How long until the carry trade is unwound? Goldman and JPM Morgan clash over the answer. After the recent global market rout that wiped out over $6 trillion in equities, investors are wondering if the unwind of the carry trade is finally over. Societe Generale strategist Manish Kabra suggests that one measure of the U.S. DJPY carry unwind is at the beginning of the end. A soft United States Consumer Price Index and a hawkish move by the Bank of Japan have driven a reversal of the U.S. JPY carry trade, underpinning risk-off sentiment for the Nasdaq 100. CNN seeks summary judgment under curious claim in defamation case. CNN is fighting a defamation case after airing a segment accusing Zachary Young and his company Nemex Enterprises, Inc. of preying on people trying to flee Afghanistan, suggesting he was a human trafficker. CNN's new motion for summary judgment cites Sharia law, arguing that what Young did in rescuing people was unlawful under Taliban restriction. However, the evidence in the case is remarkably bad for CNN after discovery of internal memoranda and emails revealed malice by the network. The judge has already ruled that there was sufficient evidence to support a claim of actual malice by CNN, which could lead to massive damages and even punitive damages against the network. Trump campaign lawyer flips will aid Arizona prosecutors in 2020 election case. A lawyer who worked on Donald Trump's 2020 election campaign will avoid jail time by cooperating with Arizona's Democratic Attorney General Chris Mayes. Jenna Ellis has agreed to testify truthfully and turn over documents in exchange for having 9 felony charges against her dropped. The case centers around fake electors, Republicans who signed a certificate asserting they were duly elected and qualified electors, assuming Trump had won the state's 11 electoral college votes. Ellis is one of 18 defendants charged with election interference, including Rudy Giuliani and former Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. The remaining defendants have pleaded not guilty to 9 felony charges each, including forgery and conspiracy. United States administration to allocate $2.2 billion for power grid upgrades. The United States Department of Energy is allocating $2.2 billion in grants for upgrades to the grid to make it more resilient to extreme weather events and accommodate more renewable energy. The funding will add to private sector financing to support 8 grid upgrade projects across 18 states, including the construction of over 600 miles of new transmission lines and the upgrade of approximately 400 miles of existing line. FedEx and UPS must adapt to changing parcel landscape. FedEx and UPS have dominated the United States parcel delivery market for decades, but recent trends indicate a shift in customer behavior and an increase in competition from private fleets of major retailers. Customers are downgrading from air express to ground service and from ground to lower price services like SurePost, which involves injecting parcels into the United States Postal Service system for final mile delivery. This change has been driven by improvements in ground transit times, making them faster than those of competitors, as well as investment in multi-carrier manifesting systems and visibility and analytics companies. The growth of e-commerce over the past 10 years has also contributed to this shift, with 65% of all domestic parcels being delivered directly to consumers, leading to an increase in regional competition from smaller carriers operating at a lower cost structure. By 2026 peak season, private fleets of major retailers are positioned to deliver more parcels to residences than FedEx and UPS combined, with estimates suggesting over 40 million parcels per day. Top Goldman trader warns we are still very much in Adult Swim territory. Goldman Sachs prime broker data indicates that hedge funds bought the dip in North America yesterday, driven by single stock purchases, marking the largest one-day buying spree in 5 months. The sectors that saw buying activity were technology and defensives, including healthcare, staples, and utilities. However, a top Goldman trader warned clients that despite this development, the market remains volatile and uncertain. House panel expands Act Blue probe, calls on Federal Election Commission to help prevent fraud. A House panel is expanding its investigation into whether the Democratic fundraising platform Act Blue may be skirting or violating federal campaign finance laws by facilitating the funneling of unlawful contributions to political committees across the country. The probe was launched last fall amid allegations that Act Blue does not require online donors using a credit or debit card to provide a card verification value, which could invite the possibility of foreign donations and allow straw donors to skirt campaign contribution limits. Representative Brian Steele is now asking the Federal Election Commission to initiate an emergency rulemaking process to require political campaigns to verify online donors' CVV codes and bar them from accepting donations via prepaid credit cards or gift cards, or gift cards, or gift card. 3-year auction stops through, despite yield plunge to 16-month low. Today's auction of $40 billion in 3-year paper was met with strong demand despite yields rising by 10 basis points earlier in the day. The high yield for the sale came in at 3.81%, down from 4.39% last month, and the lowest level in 16 months. Indirect bidders took 64.4% of the offering, up from 64.0% in July, while direct bidders were allotted 20.25%, leaving dealers with 15.35%. The crash bottom, or the beginning. The current correction in the market has been sharper than the average over the past 100 years. Maricopa County sued after refusing to remove illegal immigrants from voter rolls. America First Legal has filed a lawsuit against Maricopa County Recorder Stephen Richer for allegedly failing to verify the citizenship of voters registered in the county and refusing to remove non-citizens from the voter roll. The lawsuit claims that Richer is violating Arizona state law by not performing monthly list maintenance required to verify the citizenship status of registered voters who have not provided proof of citizenship, resulting in an increase in the number of registered voters without confirmed citizenship under his watch. Watch Japan, the epicenter of global market stress. Investors should closely monitor the Japanese yen as it remains strongly connected to the Standard & Poor's index in the short term